In this presentation, I'd like to discuss our approach to integrating the electronic signature handling protocols defined by eIDAS into the e-archiving reference architecture. But first of all, I'd like to clarify the context of this work and this presentation. Earlier, Carlotta and Marta discussed electronic archiving services under the new eIDAS regulations. What we are addressing here is not the qualified electronic archiving services, so not the electronic archiving service, but rather preservation evidence-related services within a digital archiving context. So managing digital signatures, seals, timestamps as part of preserving digital assets. Actually, this is exactly what someone questioned at the end of the last part, integrating ETSI 119, 511 or 512 to the reference architecture. So our community primarily comes from the world of traditional archives. However, eIDAS hardly addresses traditional archive practices. So what's the difference between a traditional archive and, let's say, an e-ARK or an archiving-related eIDAS trust service? It's hard to define better. A traditional archives takes the ownership and the responsibility of the data, as opposed to a trust service which doesn't take over the ownership, but can take over parts or must take over parts of the responsibility. A traditional archive is a trusted service by nature or by law, but not necessarily in the same sense as we're talking about it in the eIDAS context. And it must be qualified, a trust service must be qualified to be a qualified trust service. And the traditional archive is focusing on preserving the content and metadata for the long term, while this service is focusing on preserving preservation evidence, like electronic signature, for the midterm. In the ETSI standards, it's said that it's long-term preservation, but it defines long-term preservation, long-term, as a period of time within technical changes can happen. So that's from our point of view, from a digital archiving point of view, short-term or mid-term preservation. So what are the options? Here are the options that we have if we want to preserve digital material that includes preservation evidence, such as electronic signatures. This is not a new issue for archives, actually. It's part of an ongoing conversation within the digital archival community. So we have basically three choices. Preserve the digital signatures. This needs quite an effort and money. We could eliminate the signatures and only keep the content. This is, I would say, the most likely scenario at the moment, but not the recommended one. The recommended one for archives, I would say, is the third one. The other two options work also, but to eliminate the signatures, but keep a record of any preservation evidence in the metadata. And obviously, a trust service must preserve digital signatures. But also, a traditional archive can preserve digital signatures in some cases. So our work, I will present in a moment, is useful for traditional archives in cases when they want to preserve preservation evidence, or trust services preserving preservation evidence if they follow the OAIS model. So behind the specification behind OAIS, the standard behind the traditional archives is OAIS, and the specifications behind eIDAS trust services are the many ETSI specifications. In our case, the ETSI 119, 511 and 512 specifically. Here now you can say what I was talking about, that providing long-term data preservation, but this long-term is not that long-term. As the new eIDAS regulations were created and published, we wanted to take a look at what would this all mean to an OAIS-based archive, or in general, how we could harmonize the two. So, I'm still setting up the stage about the OAIS model and very little about the reference architecture, and then we can come to the main point. So the OAIS, a very brief introduction to the OAIS model. The model defines three participants: a producer, the archive itself. The producer is the records creator. It creates and submits the records to the archive. The archive manages it for the long run until the consumer requests some data, searches for or requests some data, and then it provides the data. It defines three kinds of information packages: a submission information package, the package submitted by the producer; an archival information package, or short AIP. This is the long-term preservation format, and the dissemination information package for access. And it defines six processes or functional entities, as OAIS calls it: ingest, creating the long-term preservation format AIP from the SIP, preservation planning, dealing with a lot of things, monitoring the community, technology changes, legal changes, creating policies, strategies, handling the registry, and a lot more. Data management is about metadata handling. This is the database for metadata. Administration does a whole lot of things. It's involved in all of the other five. Archival storage for actual storing the data, and access if the consumer requires data. As we analyzed all of these, it turned out that only ingest and preservation planning needs anything to do or needs any changes because of preserving digital signatures. I don't want to go into detail to the reference architecture, but sorry. Yeah. So we have views for all the OAIS functional entities, process views. You don't have to read, see, understand all of these tiny details. I will drive you through with these red frames. So in the first step, this is the ingest process, when the producer submits a submission information package, and we create an archival information package from it. In the first step, the producer creates and submits the package. In the second one, there's a quality assurance. If this is successful, then we go over to generating the AIP from the SIP. And we give the AIP to the archival storage service to store it, and parallelly we generate the descriptive information, so the metadata, and give it to data management to store it in the database. So this is the normal ingest process without electronic signature handling. What we have added is an external service, a general external service for the trusted service provider, and it's connected to the whole ingest process, or ingest process, because it can be called at many places. It will be called at quality assurance and will be called at generate AIP, definitely. What we have also added is the evidence preservation service and the preservation evidence data itself. In the optimal scenario, the service should provide the preservation evidence to include the AIP in the AIP, then ingest coordinates, updates, and send the AIP to archival storage and metadata to the data management function. So we have identified two fundamentally different scenarios, then we will have sub-scenarios. So scenario A is preservation evidence, is when the preservation evidence is part of the archival information package, and scenario B, when we consider preservation evidence only fixity information, so it will be part of metadata. Scenario A, we have an ingest scenario, and as I said, the preservation planning, so a monitoring and augmentation scenario with real OAIS re-ingest, I will talk about, and monitoring and augmentation scenario without the OAIS re-ingest. And just an ingest and monitoring and augmentation scenario for scenario B. So, scenario A is what I have actually showed you when I introduced the ingest process. The difference is that during quality assurance, the contents of the SIP are validated, including the digital signatures. This validation can be performed internally or by resorting to an external service provider. We don't want to dictate what people should do. We rather collect information and try to model what is common, what is a pan-European standard or best practice or something like that. That's why we let even things that are not fully OAIS compliant, but it's not unusual in practice. So in the third step, that's no change, but during the AIP generation, the evidence preservation application service is used, where the preservation evidence is generated. The next scenario is the preservation planning process, and you can see that the only one thing to be changed here is just adding this evidence preservation service. That's the same service from a higher point of view. So in this scenario, the evidence preservation service sends a trigger to preservation planning to perform a digital signature augmentation action. Augmentation in this context is just updating the signature for any reason. Risk management is performed, information object structures and rules are revised, preservation policies and plans are updated. The preservation action for this event is defined and the affected packages are identified. In step 4, the affected packages are collected from storage and combined into a dissemination information package. The DIP, which is then transformed into an SIP that will be resubmitted to ingest. This is just a specialty of the OAIS. This is how we should do it according to OAIS. During ingest, the newly redefined preservation policies will be applied. That's why we don't have to put anything else here in preservation planning, because now I'm showing the big picture, and we have the preservation planning process on the left and the ingest process on the right. So after preservation planning, after a preservation action, we go through the ingest again, and that's where the augmentation, the real augmentation happens. In the scenario when we don't have this OAIS re-ingest, because we've seen that at a lot of organizations this is the way they do it, then we just do the augmentation within the preservation planning process. And in scenario B, we are in an easier situation, because in this case we don't have to do anything with the archival information package. It's just metadata, because in this scenario it's just fixity information. So the ingest process goes as the same, but the preservation evidence will go to data management and to the data management database. And with preservation planning, the same scenario goes, and it will change. We don't have to re-ingest in any case, because the AIP hasn't changed. So we just alter the metadata accordingly in this preservation action. So this is work in progress. We just wanted to think it over and model how we see that preserving digital signatures and any kind of preservation evidence can be modeled within our reference architecture, can be integrated into this OAIS-based world. First of all, we are waiting for the approval of the Implementation Act. Then we will go on discussing the current views with more service providers and try to synthesize a pan-European common understanding and looking for best practices. Then we will finalize the views and scenarios and publish it in the next version of the e-archiving reference architecture. Best case scenario, this is next fall. So this is what we've done so far and our plans for the future. Thank you.